Welcome to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So how lucky am I to interview Paul Gross on a Monday in October and interviews Rossif Sutherland on a Tuesday in October. Rossif was a star in several films this year at TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival. He knocked it out of the park. I think he had three films he was involved in. I saw two of them, River and Hyena Road, which we're talking a little bit about today. We also talk about River, another great performance and a great film by Jamie Dagg that Rossif stars in. I can't believe how the people I've been able to meet, the people I've been able to talk to as a result of this podcast Face to Face. And what I love about these conversations is, yes, we start out with hey, let's talk about the film Hyena Road. And then we end up in so many other places and with so many other insights and ideas about life and about change and about, I don't know, becoming a better human. Oh man, that sounds corny, but I really, truly believe it. So buckle up. You're going to really enjoy Rossif. He's got a lot of insight. He's got a lot of great stories to tell. And the film is Hyena Road and also River, which probably will be released soon. But Hyena Road, released October 9th in Canada. Rossif Sutherland here on Face to Face. So welcome to Face. We are joined by a very special guest today. I've been really looking forward to this interview. Rossif Sutherland is with us today. And hey, Rossif, before we get in, just thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, man.
So we're going to talk, I think, about a lot of things, I hope. We're going to talk about a couple of films that premiered at the film festival for you. River, directed by Jamie Dagg, and of course, Hyena Road, directed by Paul Gross, which I believe opens this Friday, October the 9th.
Yeah, here in Canada, yeah.
Here in Canada. So world premiere on both films. So before we kind of get into the film, can I ask you a kind of a generic question?
Sure.
Why acting? Why aren't you a plumber? Why don't you sell photocopiers, Rossif?
I would hope that if I had become a plumber, that I would be a decent plumber. Actually, I grew up in France, and plumbers are very sought after, and they make a very decent living. I grew up in an environment in which I was surrounded by artists, and so I was never dissuaded from this desire to play, to create. Kids have wild imaginations, and so if you give them an outlet, they'll most likely embrace it. But it was that thing of turning a pastime into a profession.
Nice.
To see my parents able to make a living, it didn't mean that I would be able to, but to see them make a living. Made the argument that I heard from a lot of other parents telling their kids, don't waste your time with writing because you got to be more serious, and you got to do this, you got to do that, and don't be so unrealistic. I never had that growing up.
So you were always sort of validated in the whatever sort of path you wanted to choose.
I was, yeah. I wanted to be a writer. That was my fantasy when I was a little kid. My father was away from home for most of the year, and instead of writing him letters, I would share short stories with him. And he was always very, very supportive. And
nice.
And so that's what I did. I studied in France up until the age of 19, and then went to the University of Princeton, and I studied philosophy, same as you.
Oh, excellent. Good.
And all that with the desire of having a profession as a writer. I discovered there that I could sing, and that was a big life changer for me.
Did you say sing?
Sing, yeah. It was a dare. I in a dorm room. There were a couple cute blonde girls, and like one of my friends picked up a guitar and he wanted to entertain them. He said, "Rossif, I dare you, man, just sing." And so I had a short story that I'd just written that was fresh in my mind. I didn't know it word for word, but I knew the gist of it, and so I just started improvising and I sang.
Wow,
And
that's cool.
and it was one of those moments when it's like looking at yourself in the mirror and seeing something that you've never seen before. It was like discovering myself.
Do you think
That was
it's a great story? And tell me about the blondes. Were they were they impressed?
no, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Yeah, no. No, nothing happened. But I kept singing as a party trick.
Oh, okay.
People would just pick up a guitar and I would just improvise. I was really not shy about whatever was going to come out of my mouth, and some of the time it was really quite. I mean, I'm flattering myself here, but it was a surprise to me. It was really quite amusing, and I would find rhymes in unexpected places, and it would just get a small crowd going, and it was fun. It was fun to me because it was always in the moment, and that was the thing that I really wanted to explore with the telling of stories, was that you never tell one same story the same way depending on the environment in which you're in.
Interesting.
It has a bunch of influence on you, and therefore, once I started singing, I didn't want things to be set in stone.
Right.
I just wanted to sing the way it came out. It was only when I started taking acting classes that changed. I explored the idea of becoming an actor when I was about, I guess, 22, 23 years old.
Okay.
Again, at Princeton. It was a lovely girl, a friend of mine. She was doing her senior thesis, and she was going to direct and produce a short film that she'd written. As her senior thesis, she was going to just write a paper about it and show the film. But she realized very quickly that she had too much on her hand.
Right.
That she was asking too much of herself, and so she reached out to me. And I think it may have just been because of my last name. I never really expressed interest in becoming a director. I'd taken a directing class just to play around with cameras and get a sense of that world. But she knocked on my door and she said, "Rossif, would you like to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I mean, why would I pass it up?
Why would you say no?
Why would I say no?" And so I embarked on that adventure, and on my first day of shooting, my lead actor decided that he had better things to do, and so he didn't show up. And so there we were waiting with all this gear that I'd put in a big truck, drove illegally through the Lincoln Tunnel, got stopped by the police because you're not allowed to drive a truck. I ended up there, and we had a team of we must have been about 20 people. It was,
Wow.
It was a decent short film.
Yeah, sure.
And all these people were waiting, and I was the leader of the gang. I was the director. That was part of the job description. I was the decision maker, and so I had to make a decision. And time was of the essence, and so I said, "Oh well, heck, I'm familiar with the script. I fit in this guy's clothes. I guess. Well, heck, I'll just do it." And so I did.
Love it.
I sold the film to my father as a director mostly. I'd spent so much time in the editing room that I kind of forgotten that it was me on the screen.
Right.
You end up cutting yourself to pieces.
Yeah, you lose any kind of sort of objective sense, right?
Yes, it's not you anymore.
That's right.
And so I showed it to my dad as a director, and I was too shy, too nervous to sit down and watch it with him. So I went to my room and I waited. And the film was 12 minutes long, and
Cool.
he made me wait for a half hour. And
Nice.
after the first 12 minutes, I was wondering, was he trying to come up with positive things to say about a negative experience? And he ended up calling me downstairs, and I heard him scream my name, Rossif, Rossif, and I come downstairs, and he was past holding back tears, and
Wow.
he said, kid, that's what you're supposed to do for them.
Wow, that's an awesome story.
I said, what, be a director? He said, well, we'll see about that, but I think you should be an actor.
Wow.
And so that's when I started taking acting classes. I wasn't really convinced, as my father was convinced.
Right.
That this was right for me. I wanted to go on a life journey and explore, the meaning of life. All those big questions that we grow up with.
Sure. Yeah.
And I wanted to figure out who the heck I was, and I thought that playing different people for the rest of my life would only distract me from that goal. But that's when things changed.
It's Rossif, sorry to interrupt, but
No.
I love the story for a whole lot of reasons. One, because it's just we got stuff about parenting and about relationships and about and just frankly just paying attention to the little things. So here's your friend, she needs a little help. You step in, your guy doesn't show up. I mean, it's just you look back. Kierkegaard. Sorry to quote the philosopher, but you live moving forward, but you only really start to understand when you look back and you see the connections and you see the dots and the points.
Sure,
right?
Sure, and if I have one piece of advice, with all the stuff that I've done, is just keep showing up. That's all you can do. I mean, there is no such thing as justice, fairness, as far as in my line of work, which is being an actor. You find yourself as oftentimes at a cattle call, an audition, a bunch of actors going for the same part, and everybody's gone through a bunch of training and blah blah blah, and they all want it, but it's all just a question of just because you've done the work doesn't mean you deserve the part, and you just show up and things will happen if you keep showing up. But I think that goes for life in general.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
back at all the things that 3 years ago, I would think of some of the stuff that I've done and think, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I'd done that differently. But here I find myself now, and I'm madly in love, and I'm gonna have my first little man joining this world of ours.
Very nice.
And if it weren't for all those possible mistakes, if I dare call them that, I wouldn't be where I am now, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
So in a recent article that I read a few days ago, I think it was by Jane Stevenson. I can't quote you right now, but the full quote, but it's a great quote, and I'll maybe even put a link into it in your bio when I put this online. But you talk about, hey, don't want to get all, my paraphrase here, Rossif, sorry about that, but don't want to get all existential on you guys out there. But hey, this is really what life's about, isn't it? Isn't it about asking those deeper questions and coming to terms with those things? And I hear that kind of in your tone, in what you're saying, obviously, but also in the tone. Do you think are you drawn to those kind of roles, would you say, in a sense, that, you're sort of unpacking some of that stuff for yourself and for others?
Oh, it's all for me.
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day, I don't do it for anybody else but for me. I don't do it. You were talking about before we started this, that about people who want to change the world, people who are putting themselves out there to make a difference. If that happens, it's with anything that I do, it's really just a side effect of my principal desire, which is just to change me, improve me.
Nice.
And so as far as roles that I'm drawn to, I'd like to think that I get to pick my roles, but I'm not at that place in my career. I'm still very much just always constantly looking for work and putting myself out there and auditioning, and I actually like the process of auditioning because it's a way to meet somebody and kind of take away from the anxiety of the first day of work. They get a taste of what they're going to get.
Sure, sure.
It's no surprise. I see my father, who's 80 years old. He's about to start a film now, and
Wow.
Parts are just offered to him, and he's so nervous when he starts a project, as am I. But it never goes away. It's not, you never get comfortable when you truly care about something.
Yeah, exactly. That's passion and commitment, and and at the risk of going too existential, the whole idea of changing yourself and then others are affected as a result potentially is gravy. I mean, I think it's honestly, at the risk of overstating, I think it's a profound observation. I think a lot of us spend very little time changing ourselves, or at least trying to anyway. Hey, listen, before we start talking about Hyena Road, I wanted to chat briefly about the film as well. Would love to talk with you about philosophy all day, no kidding. But you also appeared in a film, River, directed by Jamie Dagg, in a part of the world that I've spent a lot of time in, Southeast Asia, Laos. I can't help but see those existential connections between sort of, the character, in the film, the decisions he has to make, some good, some kind of not so good at all.
Well, I mean, just to sum it up for those people who are listening, it's a story of a guy he works at an NGO, and he's a do-gooder, and he's somebody who means well. He's somebody who's not an angel in any way. He's trying to figure out who he is, and he's got his own demons, but he's trying to make a difference, and he finds himself in a situation where he witnesses the aftermath of this young local girl's rape, and intervenes and confronts the assailant. And when that happens, a fight ensues, and then he ends up killing the guy. And the whole story is pretty much about a guy on the run, but he's very much on the run from himself, same as from the authorities that are after him. Because this act of intervention, trying to correct the wrong, by ultimately correcting a wrong he committed the wrong.
Right.
And so he's very much trying to figure out what he can live with, how he can live with himself, with what he's done, and can he forgive himself? Or does it take a court to forgive him? And does it? He also knows that if he stays in Laos, which doesn't have an extradition treaty, that he most likely will spend the rest of his life behind bars. And those are not the sort of jails. I mean, if there is a jail that you want to be in for the rest of your life, that's not one of them.
I've been in some of those jails as an NGO worker and working alongside other NGOs in the region. And let me tell you, some of them are pretty rough around the edges. Let's understatement of the century. The fact that the whole film really, I mean, it's a thriller without a doubt, and great. I love your performance in it, by the way. You say so little in the film and communicate so much, which I just love for so many reasons. But it's really, isn't that story just a series of these ultimately connected decisions, but seemingly made on the fly, but so dependent on the character, this doctor, who clearly wants to do good, but, we've all got this sense that sometimes it's, the decisions you make in the moment really are about who you are, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And those decisions end up defining you. We may want to define ourselves in a more glorious romantic light, and words can fool anybody, but ultimately what you do often speaks louder than words. And in that case, for that guy, he becomes, I don't know if you call it a murderer, but he certainly is a killer. And that mistake that he's made, that moment of seeing red, of just taking things too far, you can't take that back. And so he's got to suffer the consequences, or he's got to live with the consequences. Either way, he's got enough of a moral compass that
Yeah.
that even if he's free, he's not going to be free. It is that question of doing what you can do in order to be able to live with yourself. And
there's the whole notion of, and I'm sure you're aware of it, but this idea, and it's connected to Hyena Road for sure, but in development, this idea, Mary Anderson wrote a book called Do No Harm. It's kind of based on that whole, the Heisenberg principle. The moment you interfere with a situation, you change it. And so, as a development worker, going into a community in rural Cambodia or Laos or Myanmar or wherever it is, okay, great, you're bringing all these wonderful things in, you're building capacity, but what are you changing at the same time? Are you listening enough, to the local culture?